What is the cosmological argument for the existence of God?
The cosmological argument is actually a family of arguments, different arguments, that all attempt to prove, on the basis of the existence of the world, that there is some sort of a first cause or sufficient reason for the existence of the world.
And what are some of the subsets of these arguments?
What were some of the arguments for the beginning of the universe? Well, let's let one of the greatest medieval champions of the doctrine of creation speak for himself. Al-Ghazali was a 12th century Muslim theologian from Persia, or modern-day Iran. And he was concerned that Muslim philosophers of his day were being influenced by Greek philosophy to deny the beginning of the universe. They held that the universe flows necessarily out of God and is therefore beginningless. After thoroughly studying the teachings of these philosophers, Al-Ghazali wrote a devastating critique of their views called The Incoherence of the Philosophers. And in this fascinating book, he argues that it is impossible that the universe be beginningless. The universe must have a beginning, he argues, and since nothing begins to exist without a cause, there must therefore be a transcendent creator of the universe. Ghazali frames his argument very simply. Let me quote him. He says, "Every being which begins has a cause for its beginning. Now the world is a being which begins. Therefore, it possesses a cause for its beginning." And we can summarize Ghazali's reasoning in 3 simple steps. 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe has a cause. This argument is so marvelously simple that it's easy to memorize and share with another person. Moreover, this is a logically airtight argument. If the 2 premises are true, then the conclusion follows necessarily. So I'd like to look at this argument with you this morning more closely, starting with the second premise, that the universe began to exist. During the Middle Ages, before the rise of modern science, people had no scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe. But Ghazali presented some ingenious philosophical arguments for why the past has to be finite. For example, Ghazali points out that if the universe never began to exist, then the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. Think about it. If the universe never began to exist, then the number of past events is infinite. But, Al-Ghazali argued, this is impossible because an actually infinite number of things cannot exist. The way in which Ghazali shows the impossibility of an actually infinite number of things is by imagining what it would be like if such a collection could exist and then drawing out the absurd consequences from it. Let me share with you one of my favorite illustrations called Hilbert's Hotel, which is the brainchild of the great German mathematician David Hilbert. Now, as a warm-up, Hilbert first invites us to imagine an ordinary hotel with a finite number of rooms. And let's suppose that all the rooms are full. If a new guest shows up at the front desk asking for a room, the manager apologizes, "Sorry, all the rooms are full," and the guest has to be turned away. But now, Hilbert said, let's imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. And let's suppose, once again, that all the rooms are full. Now, this fact has to be clearly appreciated. There is not a single vacancy throughout the entire infinite hotel. Every room already has a guest in it. Okay? Now, stay with me here. Suppose a new guest shows up at the front desk asking for a room. What will the manager say? "No problem, he says. And he moves the guest who was staying in room 1 into room 2. He moves the guest who was in room 2 into room 3. He moves the guest who was in room 3 into room 4, and so on, out to infinity, so that everybody moves into the room number next highest to his own. As a result, room number 1 now becomes vacant, and the new guest is easily accommodated. And yet, before he arrived, all the rooms were already full. Now, if that seems weird, hang on to your hat, because it gets even worse. Let's suppose, Hilbert says, that an infinity of new guests shows up at the front desk asking for rooms. No problem, says the manager. And he moves the guest who was staying in room 1 into room 2. He moves the guest who was in room 2 into room 4. He moves the guest who was in room 3 into room 6, putting each guest into the room number twice his own. 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 3 into 6, 4 into 8, and so on, out to infinity. Now, think about that. Since any number multiplied by 2 is always an even number, all of the guests wind up in the even-numbered rooms, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so forth. As a result, all of the odd-numbered rooms become vacant, and the infinity of new guests gratefully checks in. And yet, before they arrived, all the rooms were already full. In fact, the proprietor could do this an infinite number of times and always be able to accommodate more guests. As one student remarked to me after class, Hilbert's hotel, if it could exist, would have to have a sign posted outside. No vacancy. Guests welcome. Hilbert's hotel is absurd. Mind you, it's logically correct for the mathematician, but it's impossible for something like Hilbert's hotel to really exist. You can describe it on paper, but it cannot exist in reality.